Hi everyone, so you may remember this doll I had a while ago, and I've done a couple of treatments on her hair because she had very black glue hair. So she had a couple of treatments where I've put the shoe polish on for half an hour and then washed her hair with lots of fairy liquid and warm water. And now her hair's finally at a standard I'm happy with. It's time to do her repaint. What I've decided for this one is to do a sleeping princess look. And first of all, what I need to do is remove the factory paint, and for that I'm using some nail polish remover with acetone in it. The one I've got has a higher level of acetone than what you get normally, so it's like a slightly stronger one. It's available at many chemists, so it's easy to get hold of. And after wiping the factory paint off, I then used baby wipes to make sure there was no residue left from the acetone and to make sure the face is fully clean, and then wiped it off with a towel to make sure it was nice and dry. And then once I had I spotted another mark, so I just got off a little smudge that I spotted. And then once I'd done that, it was time to do the repaint. You have to make sure you get all the residue of the acetone off, otherwise it could affect the vinyl later on. But if you wash it all off, it's perfectly fine. So then it was time to do her repaint, and for this it was a case of just marking up where I wanted the eyes first with a pencil. I find a pencil works perfectly well on these Ever After High dolls. Obviously it's not going to be like a really intense dark mark, but it's enough for me to be able to mark it so I know where the eyes are going and everything. So first things first is I've got some of my paint ready, and to basically make any skin tone you need alizarin crimson, titanium white and yellow ochre. If you're doing darker skin tones, to those three colours you add some burnt sienna or raw umber. It's burnt sienna, sorry. And with those you can make basically any skin tone that you come across, from very light to very dark. And for her, I could tell that most of her colour is going to be a combination of the crimson and the yellow ochre. She's got a sort of pinky yellow undertone. I can't really describe it, but basically what I do is I mix the colours till it matches. That's how I do it. So what I'm doing here is mixing various quantities of yellow ochre and crimson, a little bit of burnt sienna, and then I test it on the cheek of the doll, and if it's like a tiny bit lighter than the skin tone, that's ideal, because acrylic paint dries slightly darker than the colour you started off with. So what I do is I mix it so it's only about half a shade lighter than the actual doll's face, depending on what I'm doing, and then that way when it dries it'll match the skin tone pretty well. Sometimes I just mix it so it's the same colour as the skin tone, and it works out fine as well. So for this one I wanted to mainly start off with the lash area, and I'm just getting a different colour because I think I got the raw umber out instead of the burnt sienna, so that's probably what I'm changing here. I've also added a little bit of black to my palette as well, just to make sure I've got that if I want to. Tend to use black as a last resort. That tends to be like a very final colour, but if I'm going for a sort of more natural look, I try not to use it. So as you can see here, I'm adding some more that's probably burnt sienna to the mixture, and then this shade is now slightly darker than the skin tone of the doll, so I'm using that to mark where the lash line is of the doll's eyes. I find this is easiest when I'm doing dolls with their eyes shut, is to actually draw the lash line first, and then I can work out shading for the rest of the eyelid and everything after that. This just gives me a good starting point so I know where I'm starting from. And I always do it slightly lighter than what I want it to be, because then I know where my line's going to go, and then I can darken it later on. So as you can see now, what I've done is I've added some more of a brown colour. I think this is the burnt sienna I've added to the mixture, just to make it nice and dark now, because this is for the lash line. So a lash line, I'm doing a brown colour because she's got blonde hair, and I didn't want to do jet black lashes because I thought that would look weird. And as you can see, I'm just going over that first lash line that I created and just getting the shapes to match between the two eyes. And then again, if I spot anything that doesn't quite look right, or it's not quite tapering off thin enough, I just use my craft knife just to scrape off that little bit of paint, and then use a baby wipe if I need to, and that just removes the the smallest amount of paint if I'm not quite happy with it matching the other side. So here you can see I'm using the baby wipe just to wipe off a little smudge. And then after that, I'm mixing a pink shade. I wanted her lips to be a fairly natural colour, so I've just basically mixed the skin tone with a bit more of the crimson colour, and that's just going to give me a nice sort of, not red, but like a deep peachy lip, because again, I'm going for like a sort of natural look for this one. I do quite like painting these Ever After High dolls, actually. I like the size of their heads. I think it's nice and easy to paint dolls that have got heads that size. I prefer it. I don't like painting like Barbie sized dolls. I think they're too small and fiddly. So like when I did my Hermione Granger, that was like a bit too small for me really, but never mind. But I do prefer this sort of size for repaints. So I'm always on the lookout for these when I go to the car boot, because I find them useful. And what I tend to do as well is I'll paint the top lip ever so slightly darker than the bottom lip, because when you're walking around, naturally the sun's coming from above, so you tend to find your bottom lip will catch the light a bit more than your top lip, because your top lip is in shadow. So that's why I do that. I find it looks a bit more natural. I absolutely adore the hair on this doll. I'm not a fan of like blonde dolls, but I think her hair looks really, really nice. And I like how long it is, and it's really nice and soft as well. It's lovely. Now what I'm doing is making a slightly lighter version of her skin tone, and I'm using that to go along the edge just above where that lash line is. This is just going to create a little highlight just to make that look like the light's catching the edge of her eyelid as she's asleep. So this is just a little highlight, and it just makes that upper lid stand out a bit more. And then I did add a bit of a colour to the lid here, but it was the wrong colour, so you'll see me change it in a bit. That's why I started wiping it off. What I actually went for in the end was a skin tone with a bit more of the burnt umber mixed in, so it was like a sort of grey version of the skin tone, and then I used that to shade in where the eye socket is, because obviously I want to create shadow where the socket of the eye is, because that's where shadow naturally would be, because that's got to look more sunken in, because it's basically a hollow area that's got the eye in it. So all I'm doing here now, apart from wiping off my mistake from earlier, is I'm shading in the crease of the eye just to make sure it looks a bit more like an eyelid, because I want to create this sort of rounded effect of that upper lid, make it look a bit more like 3D as it were. And here I'm adding some teeny weeny little brush strokes. I'm just flicking the very tip of the brush against the doll's skin, and this is creating little lashes. I wanted her to have some little lashes hanging down just to make it look like she actually had eyelashes. And again, I didn't do them in black because I don't want it to look like she's got false lashes on. I don't want it to be over the top. I'm doing it quite natural. So obviously I'm trying to go for colours that match her hair and her skin tone. Then it was time to do the eyebrows. The eyebrows are always the bit where I just think, because sometimes they match, sometimes they don't. Today was one of those days where they worked, so I was quite grateful. And to do the eyelashes, to do the eyebrows, I mixed a colour that matched the hair and then just used little tiny flicking motions with the very tip of my teeny weeny brush to create little hairs, and just went over the area a couple of times, creating the shapes of those little hairs just to make it look like there were actual hairs that made up those eyebrows. And I was quite pleased with how that looked. And then I used some pastel for blush, and I went for an orangey red pastel, because I knew it would suit her skin tone and suit the makeup I'd given her. I wanted it to look a bit more natural, and you'll see at first it looks a bit bizarre and a bit bonkers, but what I do is I tend to put too much on and then I'll wipe off the excess, and that blends it in. So as you can see here, I'm using my baby wipe, and the baby wipe is ever so slightly damp, so it's not a fresh baby wipe, it's one that's been left out for a bit. And what I do is use that in little dabbing, rubbing motions just to wipe off the excess of the eyeshadow. So at the minute it looks really dark and it looks like her face is bruised, but you'll see I'll wipe a lot of that off afterwards. And it just gives a little rosy tint to the cheeks, because basically the pastels kind of like stain the vinyl, and that's the kind of look I'm going for. So yeah, as you can see at the minute it looks horrendous, but don't worry, I'll tone it down. I used a bit of that same colour with a fine brush over the eyelids as well, and in the crease of the eye. And then using my baby wipe, I wiped off all the excess powder, and then used the baby wipe to remove the top layer of that pastel and just help me to blend it in a little bit. This is to create a more natural look and to make it not look so much like clown makeup. But at the same time, there's enough colour, there's enough pigment from these pastels that it like stains the vinyl, so it'll maintain that rosy look but without being too over the top. Then it was time to put the outfit on the doll. I think that's what I'm doing here. I chose a white frilly dress that I found. It's a Snap Stars fashion pack dress. So I found that some of the Snap Stars fashion packs, the outfits fit Ever After High as well as Bratz, so that was useful to know. And I used a white frilly one for this doll because I wanted to create this princess look. And the idea behind this doll is she's a princess, she's been out partying and she's tired now, so she's come home and she's took off her shoes and she's lying down to have a nap. So I really like this dress, I think it looks really cute. Now obviously when I got her, she got one hand that was a white and blue spotty one, which is a Maddie Hatter, I believe, hand, and then another one which was hers. So what I've decided to do is paint the hands white, and then I'll put a little bit of lace around her wrist later on once I've finished the layers of white to make it look like she's got little white gloves on. In this video you'll see me do 2 or 3 coats of the white. The gloves aren't finished yet. I have got to do another 1 or 2 coats because of how blue that hand was. And then I've got to get some little tiny bits of lace to go around her wrist. So I haven't quite finished the hands yet, but I have finished the rest of the doll. So I'm just using white acrylic paint on the hands, and afterwards I'll put Liquitex matte varnish on, and it'll stay. It'll be quite hard wearing, so I'm not worried about the paint falling off or anything. And I'll also use the matte varnish on the face up later on. But what I tend to do is I make sure I leave the acrylic paint and everything to dry for about 24 hours before I varnish. You can pretty much varnish acrylic paint quite quickly, like the same day, but I always leave it till the next day just to be on the safe side. So here I'm painting her natural coloured hand to match the other one. As you can see, the other one still looks quite bluified, but over time, as time goes on with more layers of white, it looks whiter as I do it each time. And I decided not to go for shoes for this doll because, like I said, she's been out, she's been enjoying herself. She's just come home, kicked her shoes off, and he's going to have a little sleep. So that's the look I'm going for. That's why I'm not worried about shoes. Basically, she's like kicked her shoes off, but she's too tired to get changed, so she's just flopped down on her marvellous four-poster bed or whatever and gone to sleep for a little bit. I'm imagining this is quite a young princess, maybe one that's like late teenager, not sort of an adult princess. That's the kind of look I'm going for. Then, while I was waiting for the hands to dry, it was a case of doing her hair, and I decided to give her a little twist braid on the one side and then leave the rest of her hair loose. I wanted to do quite a nice simple hairstyle for her. Again, making her look quite young, and I didn't want anything overly complicated. I got a little pillow just for when I take photos and everything. So as you can see here, I've added a little twist braid at the side, and then I've got this gold flower crown, which I think came with this doll actually. I know it's an ever after high crown, and it was a gold one, and I thought it goes perfectly with her look. And then I've got a little gold. It's like almost like an ear cuff thing, but it's for when you do hair braids. It came with a pack of braiding hair I bought for rerouting dolls, so I've used that for a bracelet for her. Obviously, like I said, I've got to finish the hands, but other than that, that's it. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you like my cute sleeping princess doll. I'm really happy with how she came out, and hope you like her too. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.